Hey all, my name's Sasha Weiss. I'm a junior. I just finished my junior year studying computer science at Northwestern University. I'll be doing my master's there next year. And this is my end of quarter wrap-up video for the MicroReminders project, part of the Design, Technology, and Research program out of the Delta Lab at Northwestern. So a little bit about MicroReminders. The key idea of MicroReminders, which is sort of a change from previous quarters, we wanted to understand how context-aware micro-reminding can be leveraged to support the development of long-term behavior change, such as habit building. So two parts of that, context-aware and micro-reminding. We're very interested in taking habits, understanding how we can take a habit, produce very short, like 30 to 60-second actions that users can take to sort of further their progress towards building that habit, and then understanding what context, what real-world context users are easily able to accomplish those actions in. And then our micro-reminder system takes those habits, takes those habit actions, senses context around the user, and reminds them of those actions when they're in that context. Sort of the argument there being that we can lower the cost of doing an action by making sure that they're in this good context, and by making sure that the actions are really small, and also increase the value because each of these actions sort of has an intrinsic value. It's very low cost, high value. Hopefully they'll do it over time and build the habit. Anyway, so what I'll talk about in this video is what we did this quarter. And in summary, just to lay out the agenda, we built a prototype, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Then we ran a study, and what the study looked like is I got 6 users. I'll talk more about them in a minute, but we had them use the MicroReminder system for about a month. Did a bunch of interviews with them, and at the end of this, I'll talk about some of the preliminary conclusions we're drawing from that data. So, very first thing we did this quarter, I refactored the MicroReminders prototype. So previously it had a bunch of bells and whistles. Right now, what we added context sensing, additional context sensing. So previously it could sense time of day and location around the home. Important caveat: all these habits and habit actions, we're designing them for habits that people want to build around the home specifically. So we were able to previously sense time of day and location around the home, which we did via Estimote eye beacons, which are these little, about this big, Bluetooth beacons that ping the cell phone whenever it's in range and let our app know that the phone has entered that range. Now it can include same locations, time of day. We can also sense, we differentiate between exiting and entering a region. We can sense when people plug and unplug their phone, and we can sense time delays after an enter, exit, plug, or unplug for up to about 3 minutes. So with those building blocks, we basically use those as building blocks to assemble context, and I'll talk about some examples of that later. So that's sort of one big part of the prototype that we put out. Other part is the notifications. So when users got a notification, it would show the action that they were being asked to perform. It would show the actual habit, the habit that was tied to. And when they would click on the notification, or when they would drop, in iOS, you can open the notification to see actions. There were 2 actions, I'll do that now or not now. So those were the 2 options that users had to respond to a notification. At the beginning of the study, I asked them to respond to these notifications whenever possible. And when they would click I'll do that now, the notification would vanish and we would log that. If they would click not now, it would throw up a little text box, and it would sort of optionally ask for them to enter a reason. Our rationale there was it would help me when I interviewed them about their experience, to be able to say, oh, in this moment, at this time, on this day, you responded not now and you said this. Could you tell me a little bit more about what was going on there? That was the idea. It's been interesting to hear about users' experience with the act of responding to a notification, and how that influenced their experience, and I'll talk more about that when I get to the findings. Yeah, so also a big change from previous prototypes, there was no interface for changing or assigning context to tasks, and there was no interface for adding tasks or habits. That was something that I could do on the back end, and that did happen. through my conversations with users, when I was interviewing them, they would say, some of them said sometimes like, oh, this has been not working out, and I would go change it for them, but there's no interface for them doing it automatically, partly because we didn't think it was necessary for this idea of building the habit, since these were actions that the users were going to repeat over and over versus things they were going to add and then check off and be done with. And in addition, since we didn't see it strictly necessary, we didn't want to take the time in putting together that interface, because that could have taken a decent amount of time. Yeah, so after building the prototype, testing that extensively to make sure that it worked, avoiding the problems that sank last quarter's prototype, I did a bunch of prep to deploy the study. So we recruited 6 users. They were all college students, juniors and seniors that I knew, so friends of mine, but from a variety of areas. There were a couple people who were in computer science. There were a couple people who were theater majors. There was one user who was actually from Loyola, so sort of a wider pool. Took each of those users, brought them in, and sat down with them, did an intro interview before anything else happened. It was at that intro interview we decided what was the habit that they were going to want to build. Some of the users also came in with these things in mind, so I told them a little bit about what to expect. So some of them came in with the habit they wanted to build in mind. And then the next step is we together decomposed that habit into 1 to 3 micro actions. So those actions, these are the sort of 30 to 60 second actions that users would be able to do to make progress towards their goal. Some users came in with those already in mind. Other times, they would come up with these actions in this interview. In a couple of very occasional instances, I would sort of help them scaffold and word the actions such that they were 30 to 60 seconds, and that the user felt that it would still sort of help them progress towards their goal. So we very much designed these to be micro actions. Then the next thing we did is we took each of these micro actions and we assigned them a context. So I talked earlier about these things being, or these context aspects being building blocks, and we sort of composed them into, sometimes it made sense just to have a user say, oh, I want to be reminded in the kitchen at a certain time of day. And I'll talk about some examples of habits and actions in a minute that might make that more concrete, but sometimes that worked. Other times users would say something like, I want to be reminded of X when I'm about to go to bed or when I wake up in the morning. And so we used these things as building blocks to sort of approximate that. So if you said, for example, when I wake up, we could take that as in the bedroom, in the morning, 30 seconds after I unplug my phone, for example. And that was sort of an approximation of when I get up in the morning. So stuff like that. And then finally, I took all of those habit actions that the users put out, the context that the users assigned to each action, and I entered those into Firebase myself. So again, there's no interface for this, so I had to do it all in the back end. Gave each user beacons for however many locations they needed, and a builder to the app. So I think I'll throw out some examples of habits and actions to sort of make all of that a little more concrete. For example, we had one user who said he wanted to maintain a tidier room. So he had a beacon for his bedroom and a couple actions associated with that. He said he wanted to pick up his scattered papers. For context, he's a playwright, so he had papers everywhere, apparently. And so he would be reminded in the middle of the day when he walked into his bedroom to pick up his papers. Another one he had was make my bed, which we did for when he wakes up in the morning, using a pretty similar example to what I said with the building blocks. And then throw my clothes in the hamper was something that he wanted to do before bed, so that was, we would see when he plugged in his phone late at night in the bedroom. So that's one example. Another one, a user wanted to read more. There was another user who wanted to consume more mindfully. Another one who wanted to drink more water. Actions there were fill my water bottle and fill the ice tray, which was kind of fun. Consume more mindfully, the user had check the fridge to see what groceries I need, pack some snacks, fill a water bottle, each of which was targeted for a different time of day. Yeah, so stuff like that. So very much around the home habits that not super complex, and each of which was able to be broken down into a couple short actions. Yeah, and then so for the study itself, each of the users took built the app and the beacons. They placed the beacons in the locations that they were appropriate for. I gave them very specific instructions with regards to the range of the beacon and how to place a beacon effectively. And then they used MicroReminders for about a month, so about 4 weeks. And I held check-in interviews with them periodically over that for 3 of the users. So there was the intro interview with everyone. Then there were, for 3 of the users, I checked in 3 times, so once a week. For 2 of the users, I was only unfortunately able to check in twice, and for 1 user, only once during the middle of the month, due to circumstances beyond our control, people being out of town, otherwise unavailable. Excuse me. And then at the end of the month, I held exit interviews with all 6 users. So every user got at least 3 interviews. Most users got so intro, middle, and end, and then other users got up to 5 interviews over the course of the thing. And all in all, I held 20 interviews with users over the course of the month, generally assessing their experience using MicroReminders and trying to understand what aspects of the design were resulting in the outcomes we were seeing. So, what were those outcomes and some of the conclusions we're drawing? Excuse me, sorry, allergies. It's killing me. As a sort of a disclaimer, I've not yet been able to fully analyze all the data I collected. So what I'm going to talk about here is definitely work in progress. It is evolving, but a couple big things, big themes throughout the interviews. First off, presenting short, actionable reminders to the users in relevant context reduced the perceived cost of performing a habit action. So breaking that down a little bit, short, actionable reminders. So when users got a notification of something, they talked a lot. There's a lot of quotes that I could pull out of people saying, "It was so short. You know, why not do it? I felt like there was no good reason not to. It was so quick." People talking about 30 seconds, 20 seconds, couple minute task, very short, quick. So that was a huge theme in terms of why people did the actions. Another thing people talked about a lot was liking that it was concrete, that the action was sort of definite, like, oh, do this thing, versus sort of more abstractly, think about your habit, for example. Then the other side of that finding, so I said short, actionable reminders that were presented to the user in relevant contexts. So when they got those reminders in context, it reduced the perceived cost to them. So some of the data that led to that, to the idea of the relevant context, people saying like, oh, if I got this reminder to pick up my papers and I wasn't in my bedroom, there was no chance I was going to do it. I wasn't going to go somewhere. People saying stuff like, it was right here and I got an actionable reminder. It said to pick up my papers. I could bend down, pick it up, move it, put it down, and it was done. The fact that it was so quick, I think that definitely played a quick, also because the action was short, but also because it was easy to do in that moment, definitely helped reduce the cost of doing the habit action. Yeah. So then a second big theme, very much like building on the first one, intuitively accomplishable habit action reminders presented when the action is relevant to a user's planned activities increased the perceived value of performing that task. So on one side we have the idea that the micro actions and the context awareness would reduce the cost of performing a task, and that was sort of the big idea that we had coming in. Something that I saw a lot of that we didn't think a ton about before these interviews was that users were saying that getting the reminders, they would do the actions much more frequently when it was relevant. So people talked a lot about a future need. For example, people would fill the water bottle if they knew they were going to class and they wouldn't have a chance to get water. They were going somewhere that water wasn't readily available. If they were going to a coffee shop to work with a friend and they knew that water was available, they're much less likely to do the task. For example, a user would only pack snacks if she knew she had class the next day and wouldn't make it home. So a bunch of stuff like that. The idea of a future need or something being relevant to the user's planned activities made them much more likely to respond positively to the notifications. And the other part of what I said, the sort of beginning of that sense, intuitively accomplishable habit action reminders. And I'm still looking for better wording there. But what I mean by intuitively accomplishable, people liked that they were they were micro actions. They were short, they were concrete, they were actionable, and when people did them, they felt like they had finished them. And when users felt like they could do the task and finish it, there was a sense of accomplishment, of beating the system, of winning, were phrases I heard a lot of. And especially when people were able to mark in the notification, they said, I'll do that now. Like, I will finish the action. I'll accomplish something that that increased the value to them because they felt like they were doing something. They were being productive. They were, people who had actions early, and they said, starting the day off right, making progress, doing something that will be good for me, that was a big theme. And I guess, yeah. I might come back to that. I know there's another part to the word accomplishable that I wanted to think of. Actually, let me check my notes while I'm here. Oh, yeah, so, sorry, yeah, the two parts to the word accomplishable. I definitely need better phrasing here, but the idea that it is something they can finish, but also something that, this idea of, like, accomplishment and the winning sort of feeling, made users more likely to do the actions, especially over time. And so this over time part is the third finding, and this one is a little fuzzier at the moment, but the idea of repetition of habit actions over time reinforced and enhanced the user's perception of the actions as both easily accomplishable and valuable. And as users found, and so this is where I'm sort of going off script a little bit, as people did them more often, they talked about the actions becoming part of the routines as them noticing the reminders less. They would get the notification and they would sort of respond to it automatically, or they would sort of be expecting it, anticipating it. People said they weren't surprised by it. When they started using the system, they would be surprised by the reminders. They would be a little jarring. They would get the notification and have to think about it, but that sentiment decreased over time and it became much more routine as they did it more frequently. Yeah, and there was some really interesting stuff I heard in the exit interviews recently of people talking about how when they did the actions over and over, in the context, they learned how it was easy. They learned that it was easy. So they would read the task and they would say, oh, it's short. It's short, so I'm encouraged to do it. I know this will be quick. I know it'll be easy. But as they did it more and more frequently, they were more likely to do it again in the future because they had done it once and they knew that it was short. They knew that it was easy. There was also an aspect to it. When I said present, it was reinforce the idea that the action is easily accomplishable. So that was part of it. But also the idea that the action was valuable. So people talked a lot about how once they had been doing for example, the water bottle action over and over, they always had a water bottle with them at class. They knew that if they didn't, they would get the reminder and they would say, if I don't do the action, if I say not now, I'm not going to have a water bottle and I'm going to be sad about that fact, or I'm not going to have snacks and I'm going to have to buy food and I'm not going to like that. So people really felt that the actions were valuable, because, I guess, sort of contrapositive. If they didn't do the action, they would be sad. So this doing the actions over and over reinforced both the idea that the actions were easy and that they were valuable, partially because you would see that it's easy, like it's a micro action, it's easy to do with context, you do it, you learn that over time. Yeah, so that was just very interesting to hear. Yeah, and then I guess talking about the future a little bit, I want to continue going through the interview data, pulling out themes, making the findings a little clearer, pulling out actual evidence to support each finding. So I'm throwing some of these ideas and quotes out. I need to go back and find those exact quotes. And then I guess the goal for the summer is going to be to tie it all together and write a paper by the end of summer. So that's sort of the next direction of this, is mostly parsing through all of that, all the data we collected. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm Sasha, and this is the MicroReminders Project.